What if everything you knew about one of mythology's most feared monsters was wrong? What if Medusa wasn't born evil, but was actually an innocent victim of divine cruelty? Today, we're diving deep into one of Greek mythology's most misunderstood stories. We're going to uncover Medusa's true tale, explore the injustice she faced, and ask ourselves a crucial question. If you had Athena's power, what would you do differently? In ancient Greece, around the 8th century BCE, stories weren't just entertainment. They were moral compasses, teaching tools, and reflections of society's values. The Greeks created gods who embodied both divine power and human flaws, making their myths incredibly relatable, yet deeply troubling. Let's start with who Medusa really was before she became the snake-haired monster we know today. Medusa was one of 3 sisters called the Gorgons, but unlike her immortal siblings, she was mortal. More importantly, she was beautiful beyond imagination. Her golden hair caught sunlight like spun silk, her eyes sparkled with intelligence and kindness, and her smile could light up the darkest room. Medusa served as a priestess in Athena's temple, dedicating her life to wisdom, warfare, and crafts. She took sacred vows of chastity, promising to remain pure in service to her goddess. This wasn't unusual in ancient Greece, where temple priestesses held respected positions in society. But Medusa's beauty caught the attention of someone she couldn't refuse: Poseidon, god of the seas. Poseidon was known for his violent temper and his inability to accept rejection. When he desired something, he took it, regardless of consent or consequences. One day, while Medusa was performing her sacred duties, Poseidon entered Athena's temple. What happened next was assault, plain and simple. Poseidon violated Medusa in Athena's own sacred space, desecrating both the temple and the innocent priestess. Medusa had no power to resist a god. She was completely helpless. When Athena discovered what had occurred in her temple, she was furious. But here's where the story takes its most tragic turn. Instead of punishing Poseidon, the actual perpetrator, Athena turned her rage on Medusa. The goddess transformed Medusa's beautiful golden hair into writhing serpents. She cursed her lovely eyes so that anyone who looked directly at them would turn to stone. Medusa's smooth skin became scaly, her graceful form twisted into something monstrous. Why would Athena, goddess of wisdom and justice, punish the victim instead of the aggressor? The answer lies in ancient Greek politics and divine hierarchy. Poseidon was Athena's uncle and equal in divine power. Challenging him directly could have sparked a war among the gods. It was politically easier and safer for Athena to blame Medusa, a powerless mortal, than to confront her powerful relative. This reflects a disturbing pattern in ancient Greek society, where victims, especially women, were often blamed for the crimes committed against them. The myth reinforced harmful social attitudes that persist even today. But let's pause and consider Athena's perspective for a moment. She was bound by divine politics, family loyalty, and the complex web of godly relationships. She may have genuinely believed she was protecting Medusa by making her too dangerous to approach. Yet this reasoning falls apart when we consider the consequences. Medusa became an exile, forced to live alone on a remote island. Every person who accidentally glimpsed her face turned to stone, surrounding her with monuments to her isolation. She lived in constant terror and loneliness until Perseus eventually killed her. So here's our thought experiment. If you were Athena, standing in that defiled temple, what would you do differently? First, you could confront Poseidon directly. Yes, it might cause divine conflict, but justice requires courage. You could demand he face consequences for his actions, perhaps stripping him of some power or forcing him to make amends. Second, you could support Medusa instead of punishing her. Imagine if Athena had granted Medusa protective powers that she could control, rather than a curse that isolated her forever. What if she'd given her the ability to turn enemies to stone while protecting innocents? Third, you could use this moment to establish better protections for temple priestesses. Create divine laws preventing gods from assaulting mortals in sacred spaces. Make it clear that such behavior would face severe consequences. Fourth, you could transform this tragedy into education. Share Medusa's story truthfully, making her a symbol of resilience rather than monstrosity. Let her experience teach both mortals and immortals about consent and accountability. The real tragedy of Medusa's story isn't just her individual suffering, but what it represents about systems of power. When those in authority fail to protect the vulnerable, when they prioritize political convenience over justice, everyone suffers. Medusa's myth has influenced countless works of art, literature, and film throughout history. From ancient Greek pottery to modern movies, she's been portrayed as everything from a terrifying monster to a feminist symbol of female rage. In recent years, many artists and writers have reclaimed Medusa's story, presenting her as a survivor rather than a villain. They've highlighted the injustice she faced and questioned why we've traditionally viewed her as the monster in this tale. This reframing matters because myths shape how we understand the world. When we tell stories that blame victims, we normalize injustice. When we examine these tales critically, we can learn to do better. The question, "What would you do differently?" isn't just about ancient mythology. It's about how we respond to injustice today. Do we take the easy path, blaming those who can't fight back? Or do we find the courage to challenge powerful people who abuse their authority? Medusa's story teaches us that wisdom without compassion is incomplete. True justice requires us to protect the vulnerable, even when it's difficult or politically inconvenient. As we conclude this exploration of Medusa's true story, remember that myths aren't just ancient entertainment. They're mirrors reflecting our values, fears, and hopes. By examining them critically, we can better understand ourselves and work toward a more just world. The next time you see Medusa's image, don't just see a monster. See a woman who deserved better, whose story challenges us to be braver, more compassionate, and more willing to stand up for justice, even when it's hard. What would you do differently? The answer might just change how you approach injustice in your own life. For more powerful myths and legends, please like, comment, and subscribe to Mythic Narratives Hub.